Good morning. Welcome back to the second day of our Engadin Art Talks Form and Impact. And it's now my honor and pleasure to open the morning session with a talk by my Al-Ibrashy, coming from Cairo, directly from Cairo actually, from 0 meter above sea level to 1,700 meters above sea level. Also, as you told me, the first time that you're in a place where it's actually snowing a lot. You're an architectural engineer specialized in architectural conservation, sustainable heritage management, and urban regeneration in historic Cairo. And you're the founder of Megavra Built Environment Collective, a twinship between an architectural firm and an NGO that engages with the built environment with a focus on theory, praxis, art, cultural heritage, and social responsibility. There's so many prizes that you got that you asked me not to read the list because you said you only need them for fundraising. So if there's somebody in the room who would like to give funds, we will then disclose this list privately. But one prize I have to mention because it fits very well with our topic. It's of course a very prestigious prize. It's the Prince Claus Fund Impact Award for 2022. We're super happy that you're here. My thanks.
Thank you, Philip. Okay, Philip stole my first disclaimer, which is it's very high, the altitude is very high, and I'm a little bit short of breath, so you will bear with me. My second one is the fonts are off, so imagine nicer looking slides. So I am going to talk about an initiative that we have run since 2012 called the Athar Lina initiative. Athar Lina translates as heritage is ours. And this initiative is based in historic Cairo. I can't convey historic Cairo in, a minute. So just here are some images, make of them what you will. But one thing I would like to point out that as diverse, crowded, overwhelming historic Cairo is, it is but a small red dot in 450 square kilometers of Cairo. And another 700 square kilometers are planned to be added with the new administrative capital. So this is, as Ibn Battuta, the traveler, said, the mother of all cities. In 2012, we started an initiative, as I said, called Athar Lina. We wanted to ask a question about ownership of heritage because we noticed that in historic Cairo, communities are not really involved in the preservation of their heritage. And we had a theory that ownership comes with benefit. If you derive some kind of, economic, social, cultural benefit out of heritage, you take care of it. So for 6 months, we ran participatory research and design workshops in a neighborhood called Al-KHALIFA in the southern sector of historic Cairo. And at the end of the 6 months, we came up with a number of lines of action. You can read them here, but also I'm now going to show you a 2-minute film that we did on the occasion of our 10th anniversary that shows you the kind of work that we do. Okay. So I guess it's a difficult question, so it takes a lot of time to get to it. So form and impact. Obviously, conservation is all about form, especially architectural conservation. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to preserve a form, first and foremost. But we also preserve a lot of other intangible qualities when we work on conservation. And there's a lot that I can say about that with regards to the work that we do, but I thought to focus on two things through three stories. The first is unconventional form, not what we're preserving, but how we preserve it and how we manage it. And the other one is, yes, unexpected impact. So my first story takes place in the first area where we work, in Al-Khalifa district. This is the Imam Shafi'i dome. Now, this dome is located in the Imam Shafi'i cemetery, and those who have been to Cairo know that our cemeteries are, a mind, whatever, because they're huge. They are, they're inhabited in places and they're built up. And the Imam Shafi'i dome is maybe the most important building there is there. It dates to the early 13th century, and it is spectacular. And of course, that's one of the reasons why we went there to work on the conservation project, which lasted 7 years. But there are other values to this place, and maybe even more important than the beautiful building itself is how people think of it. Egyptians so Imam Shafi'i is the founder of the fourth rite of Sunni Islam. And so he's very important from a religious perspective, but he's also a scholar, rational, erudite, whatever. And Egyptians have decided that they would prefer for him to be someone closer to their heart. So they decided that he's the one who resolves all problems, especially legal problems. And so they write him letters, they post them to him, they go to him and they talk to him. So obviously there's quality there that is not very modern, shall I say. And it is a quality that should be taken into account, but how do you do that? So we do the normal work. We do excavations, we structural conservation and so forth, and we discover elements in the building that we hadn't known existed, and one of them is this beautiful marble floor that you see. And of course, being architects and conservators, and as Philip said, always looking for the next donor, this is what we work towards, these kinds of impressive before and after images, and the pristine after images, white and perfect light, whatever. And that little square that you see there is a little peephole for people to see the marble floor that we uncovered. Well, this is it 4 years later. And what this is you see those flowers, and I was there early in the morning, so people hadn't started to visit yet. You see these coins. What people have done is they have transformed our marble floor into a shrine. They have decided that this is the shrine of someone, we don't know who, and they come and they put coins, they put flowers. The people taking care of the place have occasionally covered it with a mat so that people don't do that. They remove it and they do it anyway. And I like to think that this is really, that's how it should be, because beyond what we have done, there is something that has been in the making for hundreds of years, which is the spirit of the place and the spirit of Imam Shafi'i. And the manifestations of that spirit are very unexpected. So that's my first story. My second story is in Al-Khalifa neighborhood. And this is the neighborhood where we first started, Khalifa Street area. And this is where we're based. To this day, our office is there, or most of our spaces are there. And this is the southern section of the Qasaba. And in that neighborhood, we have a major problem with groundwater. And this is not natural groundwater. This is water that has, for more than 40 years, leaked from supply pipes and also from sewage pipes, but mostly from supply networks, which is kind of very ironic and sad, considering that we are, I think, the 10th or the 11th water poor country in the world. And the water then acquires salts. It moves up into the building again and creates damage. And what we have been thinking about is, well, I mean, this is water, it's a resource, it's a very valuable resource in Egypt. So we started to think about ways of harvesting and using it. There are many ways that we do that. The simplest one is simply to use a piezometer, like a shallow well, and connect it to a pump and extract the water and use it, mostly for greening. Cairo is not a very green city, so that's important. Obviously, after checking the quality of the water and so forth. And then we have this. So spaces that had been dumps for years are transformed into green spaces for the community. And then there are other more complex ways of extracting the water. Now, if these historic buildings are inundated with groundwater, we install a drainage or a dewatering system that pumps the water out again. And then you can take this water and use it for many purposes. As I said, greening, urban farming, fire control, municipal cleaning. And this building that you see here is only 80 square meters, and it, oh dear. And it produces, okay, he just stole my thunder, because I was going to tell you how much water it produced. So the 80 square meters produce 100 cubic meters of water per day. So this is a lot of water that we don't know what to do with. So we keep on trying to use more and more water in different ways. And now what we're thinking is, what we're creating is actually a new ecosystem within this very ungreen and dry environment. And now we're trying to think of the impact of these new green spaces that we're creating, whether on the soil or on the air quality, or what it means to the birds and the bees, and so forth. And that will be our next thought exercise for this year. But ultimately, it is about water as a connector in very unexpected ways. So my third story is in Hataba neighborhood. This is the third neighborhood where we work. This neighborhood lies at the foot of Cairo Citadel, which is the biggest monument from the Islamic period in historic Cairo. And of course, it's overshadowed by the citadel. And for years, at least since the 70s, in a very kind of borrowing from the West, the powers that be have decided that what they want to do is to clear around the citadel and expose it like, an object in a museum. So this neighborhood, for 50 years, people were not allowed to repair their homes, and this was the result. And then the result of the government telling them not to repair their homes, and their homes falling into the state of disrepair, the government then adds insult to injury and decides to list this neighborhood as an unsafe informal settlement, which means that it was slated for demolition. And this is where we stepped in. We started to talk to different stakeholders and to propose the preservation of the neighborhood and its regeneration as a place for its inhabitants, but also as a place for tourism, because the inhabitants in this neighborhood have historically benefited from tourism. And the idea is to use the older buildings and refurbish them and retrofit them as spaces for the community. And so this is normal. These are our normal, tools as architects, drawings, whatever, renders and so forth. But we also used a tool that for us was very exciting. Now, this neighborhood is known for a kind of patchwork in Egypt that actually Suzanne uses, khiyamaya. And what we did was we worked with local women on their stories, and we worked with a designer and a patchwork artisan to create a hanging that tells these stories. And these stories are of the little histories of Al-Hataba, to counteract the big history of the citadel that is threatening their life and threatening their rootedness in this neighborhood. So I'm going to leave you with quite a long film. It's 7 minutes, but it's really one of my favorite films that we've produced. And I think I will let the women of Hataba speak for themselves. Thank you.
ده قلبي ودي السلوبيتا بتاعتي.
يعني الجلابيه القديمه بتاعت والدتي بتاعت زمان دي كانت بتاعت خالتي اصلا الله يرحمها.
أنا مايا جويلي، أنا مصممة ملابس وأزياء. المشروع إحنا بنحاول نعمل خيامية كبيرة تتعلق في ضريح الشرفة. عايزين الستات بتوع المنطقة بتوع الحطابة هم اللي يشتغلوا الشغل دوت، وجزء ده ليه علاقة بإن إحنا عايزين كمان نسرد حكايتهم مع المنطقة.
السلوبيتا دي كان عمي مسافر وجابها لولاده، لمحمد لبسها محمد وهشام واختهم لبستها، وبعد كده لبستها لعيالها.
لما كنا زمان كنا بنروح نملى من حنفية بلاش وبيبقى فيه زحمة دي كانت حاجة حلوة كده زمان.
المية قطعت
عشان تروحي تملي من حنفية بلاش.
حنفية بلاش حاجته. ايوه كان مقطم فوق، لقيت القطة دي يعني في الشارع، راحت جايباها وهي جايبة، قالت لي خدي جبت لك قطة حلوة يعني عشان
نكون قاعدين ازاي كويس جدا وبعدين احنا متعلمين يعني.
فانا قلت ايه، قعدنا نقول هنسميها ايه، راح مالك حطيتها في الزلعة بتاعت التمر. فراحوا بقى ايه، محمد اخويا راح قال لا ان احنا هنسميها بنتي. والله كانت جنينه جميله، نعيش وناكل ونعمل كل حاجه ومراجيح وكل يعني هم كانوا حاطين عمال يشتغلوا فيها. كان عم حكم دون وناس كتير، دلوقتي ما بقاش حد يهتم بيها، سابوها.
الميدان بتاع
الباب اللي هنا ده
اللي تحت اللي هو عند النافوره وانت طالعه ده كان فيه مراجيح وكده، كان برضه بننزل
ايوه
كلنا
دلوقتي
موجود لحد الان في الأعياد.
العياد بس.
هنا طبعا الشارع هنا جميل، كنت بلعب انا وزمايلي
كلنا المحظوظه.
كنت بلعب
من اول المطلع لاخر المطلع. عملوا لي
الخشب.
والله
ايه من اول باب القلعه من هنا من فوق
كانت بتبقى
كان في خشب زي كده وعاملين له بتاع زي عجل رمان بلي. ينزلنا لحد تحت ونرجع ماشي بس ننزل
بس عشان هي نازله عشان ما تلاقيهاش.
وبنوال أقوال المجتهدين في مرضاتك، وبتحمد تجلدك تعبد العابدين على طاعتك. يا أول يا آخر يا ظاهر يا باطن يا قديم يا مقيت. يا أول يا آخر يا ظاهر يا باطن يا قديم يا مقيت. يا أول يا آخر يا ظاهر يا باطن يا قديم يا مقيت. اطمس بخمسا بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم تبر البيضاء قلوب أعدائنا.
فده مقاسات كويسة مش صغيرة اوي، هعرف اخيط فيها.
انا اسمي هاني السيد احمد الشهير بهاني عبد القادر. خيم المتمرس من 33 سنه. هم خلصوا اللوحات كلها اللي هي موجوده في قلب القطعه، وبعد كده انا خدتها بحطها على قطعه كبيره عامله زي اللوحه عشان تتعلق بكل القطع اللي هم عملوها.
خلينا يا ميس عارف ايه عن الشرفة؟
مش عارفة أي حاجة في أي حاجة. كانوا ناس ملتزمين جدا بدينهم، كانوا بيصلوا وكانوا بيعملوا كل حاجة، يعني بيبعدوا عن الحرام خالص.
Thank you very much, May, for leading us to the mother of all cities and to show how you engage with caring for the past and the present and the future on a very small, at the beginning, small scale, having impact, of course, on also the youngest generation. Can you say something about the way you interact with existing schools? Is this a part of education, how it happens, or are you doing this apart?
We started off working with a local primary school, but then we set up our own summer school. We have a summer camp annually. We run it for 6 to 8 weeks every summer for free for the kids of the neighborhood. But also in the course of all the conservation work that we do, we always have activities for the kids in the neighborhood, and that's what you saw here.
We have a couple of minutes for questions. Jörg Stollmann.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation and your beautiful work. I'm an urban researcher, urban designer myself, and I have a lot of Egyptian colleagues that really admire what you do. I was wondering, in the last decade, if your work hasn't become much more difficult. You're cooperating with the Ministry of Tourism and Archaeology, but at the same time, huge infrastructure development is made in Cairo. A lot of heritage destroyed, and a lot of communities a little bit disenfranchised. What to do about it? And I think the central government plan to focus more on the new development, New Cairo, the new capital, kind of leaves you a little bit in a hazard. Can you talk a little bit how you negotiate your engagement with the kind of difficult urban development politics?
Yeah, it's very challenging because there are certain things you cannot control. And one of them is the drive of the government to connect the new settlements to each other through very wide roads and flyovers and so forth. And some of them are going through cemeteries. Most of them are going through cemetery, and it's extremely frustrating. Having said that, heritage is actually one of the easier fields to work in Egypt because it's seen by the government as a benign field. We have a tradition of, what they call foreign missions, starting from the colonial period onwards. So it's something that is acceptable that if we fundraise, because most of our money we get from internationally. So if we come with our own funding and we say, we're going to help you preserve this or that monument, then they will collaborate, and they're actually quite supportive. The fine line between engaging with what is happening on the larger scale and making sure that we continue our work is something that we negotiate almost daily. Sometimes I'm asked to sit on a committee that always ends up in disaster because the government does what it does. But what we've learned to do, and originally I had a longer presentation that started with Tahrir Square in 2011 with the revolution. But what we've learned, I think, from the political, challenges that we faced over these last, maybe 20 years, is that everything leads us somewhere. Everything serves a purpose. That even if we cannot work on the larger scale of convincing the government to stop demolition, we can at least continue working in the smaller scale of neighborhoods where we're allowed to work and where we work with kids and create a community that's interested in heritage and so forth. So for our mental health, it's not very good. But also, I think that now, the way the world is, I actually think we have a lot to teach the world in terms of coping mechanisms. Yeah, so.
Yes. I have another question.
Hi, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. From my native Athens, there are a lot of things that I can relate to in terms of changes of neighborhoods. I just wanted to address also the question of this presentation and kind of reverse it a little bit, because it seems that everyday life changes the form of heritage as well. And I found very beautiful this little story anecdote that you talked about in terms of this kind of makeshift grave or temple where all these coins were thrown. And I was interested in this process when you do the restoration. Of course, we saw the communities participating and activating, but what about, let's say, a few steps back? I was wondering whether collection of oral histories was something that you were interested in forming somehow and reforming this heritage, or what the heritage will be after the restoration.
Thank you so much for asking this question. We do our homework, but it's not enough. So we will collect oral histories. When we acknowledged at the beginning, we were like, the only work that happens on these monuments is conservation. We should think about other softer ways of engaging with heritage. But then we acknowledge that it is still important to conserve, the building, and but with a caveat that we have to think about the narrative and accessibility. And so from the start, we knew that this is something that we should do. We try as much as possible to include oral histories in, as you saw in the last film, in the narrative of the building that we're working on. But Imam Shafi'i, which is the first dome that you saw, actually taught me something that for me was a paradigm shift. That it is really a question of it is a matter of questioning how we see the world in terms of space and time. That these shrines, the main visitor of this shrine is someone who believes that someone who has been dead for, I don't know how long, hundreds of years, can speak to him, can listen to him, and that person can also move in our Islamic version of limbo, between time and space. And this is not a metaphysical kind of, this is real. But it's not real to us. I mean, it's not real to, not to us, but it's not real to me, right? And what is real to me is keeping the project on budget, making sure everything is done on time, negotiating with the government, and so forth. So then the question becomes, how do you negotiate between these two spatial and temporal planes? And how do you allow this plane that is foreign to you to enter you? And so that it starts to inform you in ways that are not rational. I don't know how. But I think that what I can tell you is that working in Imam Shafi'i has changed me in ways that are very visceral. And I think that this is the beginning of a different way, for me at least, of thinking about how to engage with, with conservation.
We'll have to conclude. I take as a lesson that that you keep open the access to history and to the past, and this access to the past is also a source of life for the present and the future. A big applause for my Al-Ibrashy.